I'm George Ybarra, welded metal artist living here in Missoula, and welcome to the Perpetua exhibit and talk with the Art Associates of Missoula.
I want to tell people who are visiting that we exist because we love art. We love looking at art, experiencing art. We give workshops so that you can get involved in art yourself. And then we have these marvelous artists come to tell us how they do their art. So we love that. But you know what else we do? We try to raise money so we can give it away. And give the Missoula Art Museum $3,000 a year to support the 5th grade art experience, where they get, all the children in Missoula County are invited to come. And we help with trying to get the buses to bring the kids, and then they look through the entire museum, and then they go downstairs in our room that we helped support to make the art education room, and they do things like, did you see the little birds around the corner? Mm-hmm. That's Kathy Weber's. If you haven't been to the museum, it's an amazing installation. And all these 5th graders are making birds. And some of them have backpacks, and some of them have hats, and they're very creative. But at any rate, so part of our existence is loving art and supporting art. So we keep trying to do things to earn money. So we give workshops.
Thank you, Susie.
George,
Awesome.
And so thank you. And do you want to say a few words about the gallery?
Four Ravens is very thrilled to have all of you come, and we're thrilled to have George and come and talk about his work. And yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you, Susie, for the commentary. I love what the Art Associates has done for Missoula artists. This is the second talk, actually, I've given with the Art Associates. The first time I was at the Art Museum, and I was actually, I believe, was it just after I finished up my BFA at the university, and you guys invited me to show some of the work that I was doing at the time. And so having that support from your community really helps make a stronger artist. And so I really appreciate all that the Art Associates has done to assist me in giving me inspiration to keep doing what I do. So I also want to thank the Four Ravens Gallery for having me do this exhibit here at Four Ravens. They do wonderful work here. So when I was invited last year to do an exhibit, I wasn't sure exactly what their feelings would be on a sea-themed art show in Montana, but it's kind of been my latest inspiration, and so with that, they seem to be, caring enough to want to, feature this work and show what I'm doing now. Artists, like Susie was saying, we change things that we do. And so with this show, it's kind of a change up on themes from some of the work that I've done over the past 20 years. So thank you, Four Ravens. Again, my name is George Ybarra. I'm a local artist. I've been living here in Missoula since 1989. And since that time, I attended the University of Montana in '91 in the School of Fine Arts. I had the opportunity to study under professors like Tom Rapon and Beth Lowe and David Regan, Steve Connell, who was my mentor for 4 years while I was studying metal fabrication at the university. Let's see, who else did we have? Don Bunsey, who was in the printmaking department at the time. James Todd, just to name a few. Just great talent for professors at the University of Montana that really made me who I am today in what I'm doing in my work. It was a great study and learning the various aspects of being a fine artist. And they did a wonderful job, not only for me, but for other students as well. In 1995, it's kind of a significant date for my work because I kind of came out of the university, and at that time in Missoula, there wasn't a lot of places to show more avant-garde style art and abstract art. We had some great galleries in town, but it was more representing things that were of the region, which means that you might see a lot of, elk and fish and things of that nature. Yeah, and so it was really hard for artists coming out of the university because a lot of the other students that I was working with, we were doing things that were, non-representational. And so it was really hard to kind of get that stuff into the Missoula community. And so I founded with a group of friends an alternative gallery called the Blue Empress. And the Blue Empress, we did art shows. It was part of James McDonald Architects, which is now A&E Architects, which is just right next door to us, basically. You would enter the gallery through the alleyway behind Butterfly Herbs. So we had a little stairwell that would kind of 4 feet wide that would kind of take you up to a larger room. That Jim McDonald had given us to be able to do First Friday events, and so we were able to show our work, and with that, it really inspired me to kind of want to move forward with doing what I did. It was a big inspiration to be able to take our work and show it to the Missoula community, and not only did I show my own work, but I also represented and did shows of artists that were at the university studying in both undergrad programs and grad programs at the university. So it was great for them as well. So it was a good combination. And a lot of the professors that I was working with at the time thought it was a wonderful idea to be able to get some of this art out of the university into the Missoula community. So it was a great endeavor. And I have to thank Jim McDonald Architects for offering us the exhibit space for doing that. As I was studying art at the university, my mentor, Steve Connell, who some of you may know, he had retired from the University of Montana. He was acting chair at one point, but also was the lead professor in the sculpture department. And when I first started with him in metal fabrication, welding, it was a whole new process. I knew a little bit about welding from my high school years, being in 4-H and doing a little bit of welding in high school, but was given the opportunity to basically learn how to use more modern style equipment for putting sculpture together in metal. And at the time, he was creating some large-scale pieces for a showing that he was doing over at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. And so I was given the opportunity to actually assist him on some of the fabrication of his pieces that he was building for that show, and was able to get a better understanding of what it was like to be able to make three-dimensional sculpture using basically flat sheets of metal. And so it was real inspiring for me to want to continue in that process. And so I decided at that particular point that I wanted to have my focus be mainly in metal fabrication. And so I've been able to continue that process up to this date. Thank goodness, because my senior year, I was part of an exhibit at the Art Annex at the university. Some of you may know where the Art Annex is. It's a small gallery that's part of the sculpture and ceramics studio at the university. And so students would get bodies of work together and they would show them in this annex gallery. And at the time, I was just starting a design on the Perseverance sculpture, which is now in the Silver Park. Mm-hmm. And these are some photographs of the piece as we were piecing it together. But this started out as a 3-foot model. And so just a tiny little 3-foot piece. It was an idea. It started out in foam core as a 1-foot scale, and then I scaled it up to 3 feet. And I had it as part of this Art Annex exhibit. And Jim Criley, the late Jim Criley, who was the dean of the Fine Arts School at the time, came to the exhibit. And he was really interested in this little 3-foot sculpture that I had created. And I was flattered, obviously, the dean of the Fine Arts School having an interest in this piece of artwork. And so we talked about it. We visited about how I was planning this to be a monumental work someday. And what he said to me was that he really thought that it would work as a large-scale piece. And I was flattered by that because Dean Criley had wonderful taste. He just had wonderful taste for sculptures and paintings. He was just an all-around artist himself, and just and great, a dear person, and I miss him. But he said, this can work, you could do this. And then he asked me, in fact, how much is this? He's like, I want to buy this piece of artwork. And at the time I was like, whoa, I had not sold anything. I hadn't really built much. I'm like, okay, how about $100? And so he's like, okay, I'll take it. I'm gonna put it, he's like, I got a place to put it in my garden. He's like, I'll enjoy it, and so from then on, it took me to the next level as being a metal student, and having Dean Criley have this interest in my artwork. And so I continued to pursue in the arts and continuing welding and doing small projects. And then as I met the end of my senior year, which was pushing towards 96, I had done a show based on Mesoamerican mythology. And so it was a series of figurative works that was based around Quetzalcoatl and all the Meso mythology that was kind of going on back in the early Meso years. And so I kind of brought kind of more of a modern twist to the sculptures. And there was probably about, I want to say there was 6 or 7 pieces that were part of that exhibit. And there was one titled The Abduction of Zapotli, and it was about Quetzalcoatl kind of getting tied up. He was a serpent figure, and it was like a 3-foot statue, kind of figurative. And Dean Criley had come to the show, and I saw him kind of walking around, and he was really kind of taking an interest in that one piece. And I didn't think anything of it, and so I later came back to see the show, and I noticed that there was a red dot on the piece, and there was another little note next to it that said that it was the Dean's Choice Award. And so at that time, artists, we didn't really know what the value of the art was. We knew that we had to, we were looking at other artists' work, and we were trying to come up with values of what we thought it would be. And on that particular piece, I had priced it at $1,200. And so I thought to myself, wow, this is wonderful, and to see that it was the Dean's Choice Award, which means that when the Dean acquires a piece from a BFA show, it goes into the permanent collection for the Museum of Art and Culture. And so with that piece, it's now part of the Museum of Art and Culture's permanent collection. And periodically when they bring out the collection, and they bring out different pieces because they don't have a large gallery space, but they will bring that out on occasion. And it's always fun to be able to go and see your piece as part of a museum's collection. So real inspiring. So with that $1,200, I had $1,200 and no taxes taken out of it, straight $1,200 check. And so I knew that I was going to be leaving the university, and that I wasn't going to be, I wouldn't have the welders, I wouldn't have the cutters, I wouldn't have the grinders, I wouldn't have the helmet. The welding industry is an expensive business. It requires, there's a lot of different aspects of it that, it costs money. And so I knew that I had to figure something out. So I took this $1,200 and I went and bought a welder. I went and bought a welding helmet. I went and bought a respirator, of course, eyeglasses, and grinders, and some things that I would need, acetylene torch, which now I retired. I ended up being able to get a plasma cutter, which is great because you can cut through metal like cutting butter, rather than with a torch where you have to do a lot of preheating and cutting. It takes a lot longer to be able to cut through the metal. And especially doing something kind of a little bit more intricate like this, it's almost impossible to do. So having really clean cuts is great to be able to weld something that's a little bit more intricate. So I was set up. I was able to plug in, I was able to continue fabricating and working. and so real inspiring to be able to take that money and reinvest it into to the work. And I still use the welders and grinders and everything today that I had bought over 20 years ago now. So I worked as an artist. Studied art school at the university here. In 1998, up until 2004, I worked in the gallery industry, and I met wonderful artists like Marion Lavery, Susie, of course, Martha Elizabeth. Who am I missing here? Gosh, so many great artists that had been part of the galleries that I had worked at. But I spent some time working for Sutton West Gallery, Jeffrey Sutton, and of course Dudley Dana next door at Dana Gallery. Spent almost pretty close to a decade between my time working at the Blue Empress to my time with Sutton West Gallery and then my time with Dana Gallery. And so almost 10 years working in the industry of art sales. And it really, being in the galleries, really enlightened me to the idea that, okay, you know, art is more than just the creation of it. It's about putting price tags on it. It's about you know, trying to sell it, market it, get it out there into the public. It's not just something that, you know, we're doing just because we want to do it. We have to, you know, think about it more as a business. And so it kind of brought to my attention that with my own personal work, that I needed to start thinking about art as a business. And so with that time period that I spent in the gallery industry, it just really assisted me in that endeavor. And Jeff Sutton was great at, of course, art sales, as we all know. He's pretty amazing. And so he really kind of mentored me in learning about the art business, and Dudley as well. So I have to thank both of them as far as the progression of my work. In 2004, I was fortunate enough to get busy in my own personal sculpture work. I was having both private collectors and corporate collectors coming to me wanting sculpture pieces, and these were commission pieces, so these weren't pieces where I can actually go into my shop and create what I feel I want to create for that time period. It's more based on design-oriented pieces. And so everything's laid out either in an AutoCAD or in a drawing format, and you have to stick to that. So there's no like, oh, I can change this or I can change that, because once you present an idea in a commissioned work, basically you have to fulfill that particular idea. And so it taught me how to stick with an idea. When you get an idea, stick with it rather than changing it up. And I think for a lot of artists who are working should definitely try a few commissions, because I think it makes you a stronger artist. I think it can take you further into your work, and so for me it did that. I also had the opportunity to show you know, in other locations in the Pacific Northwest and internationally, in British Columbia and New Zealand, and even Cargill and Palmerston North. And those were great opportunities. While I was creating my sculpture in 2004, I was having trouble finding places to show large-scale work and heavier work. You know, so these pieces are heavy, but you could still get them through the door. Some of the pieces I was creating at that particular time were big, flaring pieces, and they weighed a lot, and so it was really hard to kind of get them into gallery spaces. And other artists that were working in my medium that were experiencing the same thing were also having the same issue. They were keeping most of their pieces like in their garages or in their backyards, and just didn't have a whole lot of places to show. And so I thought to myself, you know, we need to think of what we could do to, you know, to make this work for us. And so one day I was out at Karis Nursery, and I was buying plants with my wife. And I looked around and I saw all this open space, and I was like, wow, paved walkways, beautiful plants growing, you know, I mean, trees. It was absolutely fabulous. It was a botanical garden. And so I thought to myself, this is great. I'll talk to Bill Karis about doing an outdoor sculpture exhibit here and having it run through the summer months, you know. So we'll transition pieces as they sell, bring in new ones. As one sell, and feature this original artwork there. And so that's what we did. Bill was absolutely interested in it, and he's a strong supporter of the arts, and that's one great thing about Missoula is that everyone is supportive of the arts, and that's what makes our community, I think, the strongest. Is just the community building and respecting art, and so Bill was totally into it, and so for 13 years I worked on organizing the outdoor sculpture event that was at Karis, and we always had wonderful pieces, and from that time, I got to work with Bill Orman and had showed many pieces. He was super talented. Don Grazier. And bless their souls, they've passed now. 13 years of curating that show, I worked with some wonderful artists and lost some great friends in that 13 years. Artists like John Cook, who, and most of you guys are from Missoula, so you probably know some of these names, but John Cook, Ole Field, Rink Davis, of course, Bill Orman, Don Grazer, and Kent Perlman, all amazing artists, and they'll be missed for their, kind and warm-spirited hearts. They're just great people that inspired me, and they'll always be in my heart for sure. In 2008, with the markets fluctuating, things were happening, the real estate market, just 2007, started to move into 2008. Just nobody was really buying much. And so at that particular time, as artists, we have to kind of start thinking out of the box. Like, we have families, we have livelihoods we still have to do. We know we're still going to be an artist, but maybe we won't be in the studio as much as we'd like to be. But we're going to get there, And so I ended up working with Bill Karis at Karis Nursery and spent about a decade working with Bill. He's an amazing landscaper and nurseryman and taught me a lot about plants and things of that nature. And I think they correlate with the idea of working outdoors with my outdoor sculpture and working in the plant industry. I think it really helped me with my site-specific work. I would install a piece and people would ask me, well, what would look great next to that? Do you think it'd be fun to have something around it? And I was able to assist with either planting some unique shrub or tree. And so the combination between the two really worked out great. In 2015, I submitted a design proposal for the 1% for Art for Silver Park, which is the park, of course, next to Osprey Baseball. It's now considered the Sawmill District, just off of Wyoming Street. And I actually did end up getting the 1% for Art. It was a competition where 60 artists had submitted a design proposal for a sculpture to go into the park. And I was pleasantly surprised to get the call from the chair of the Public Art Committee letting me know that my sculpture had been selected to be the piece for in Silver Park. And I was really surprised at first because, I knew that Missoula was changing as far as what people were envisioning as far as the themes of art. I was always under the impression that that the city would want something that was more representational, something that was not as abstract, and so we started the process of this piece in 2015, and we finished it up for an unveiling in it was August of 2016. But here we are. Here's the steel that came in from Carnegie, Pennsylvania, all U.S. stock, engineered and made in the United States by Structural Dynamics Incorporated. They only make this flange beam once a year. It's a W30 by 90. That's what it's called. It's Core 10. Super expensive. And they trained it out here from Pennsylvania. And we were within about 2 feet of having enough steel to be able to create the piece. Otherwise, we would have had to wait another year to get the amount of steel that we would need to be able to get the piece. So, of course, the Public Art Committee, in conjunction with the Missoula Redevelopment and the Silver Foundation, it was a three-part commission. Of course, we're on a timeline, so we want to be able to try to get the piece done for an unveiling in 2016. Of course, site location, we're figuring out where it's going to be. Now it's kind of like right in here. We had a lot of trouble figuring out where it was going to go in the park because there was only so many locations within a sawmill where digging, where digging down into the ground, you were basically digging down into sawdust, and so you could go 70, 80 feet down and you're basically in sawdust. And so there was only so many locations that we'd be able to support the weight of the piece because we're 70,000 pounds above ground, 30,000 pounds of concrete and steel below ground. And it can take over 100-mile-an-hour winds. Excuse me. Tom Bodette did all the engineering on the piece and did an amazing job. We originally were going to put some vents on the side. You can kind of see in this model right here of the piece. So we did the maquette. There was a seam kind of going through the back and the side frame here, so the air would be able to get blown out the sides if it hits the underbelly, because it does kind of cantilever over. And but then Tom said, I think I've engineered it in the weight of the concrete that we wouldn't have to do that, which I was pleased with because I didn't want to have that open seam there. So for a year, we worked on this. I used PCS fabricators here in Missoula when I was looking for fabricators to be able to help me fabricate the piece. They were telling me that I had to go to Chattanooga, Tennessee. They said I was going to have to go to Seattle, Washington. And I knew that I was going to be able to build the piece here because obviously as the artist I had to be able to be here to walk the fabricators through the piece. And of course I wanted to be able to weld on it myself. And so for me to be able to weld on it, I had to have $1 million worth of insurance from my fabricators because they wouldn't want me in their shop. Because if anything were to happen, like dropping a heavy piece of metal on your foot or on your head, they just didn't want to be liable for that. So, and then of course the Public Art Committee had their own insurance ideas as well, as far as working in the park and actually working on the actual fabrication of the piece. So, so I was able to work on it, which was a wonderful thing to do, working with the fabricators on this particular piece. You can kind of see again the joining and how we kind of craned it. Let's see, here we go. This is kind of a good one here. How we kind of craned it in pieces. So we constructed the leg structures, and then those were set in the ground first. Then we brought in the upper torso piece, and then that mounted, and as it was suspended, we were up on scaffolding, and then we were basically welding the leg structure together. And it's all braced, so that way as we were welding it, nothing was going to contort because it was, heating up pretty hot, and of course, setting the bolts and everything for the concrete. So it was a pretty big endeavor. I enjoy going there in the summertime with my kids. In fact, I was there at the pavilion this summer, and there was a couple kids that had hammocks and they were hanging from the leg structure. Hammocking is kind of a big thing for kids to do now, and so my daughter was like, "Dad, I want a hammock on that too." I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" A couple kids had them kind of double stacked like bunk beds. It was kind of funny. So that's my latest big work. I have some other designs for some other large-scale pieces that I'm hoping to submit for both Missoula Public Art and, of course, regional public art submission ideas. So basically where we're at right now is we're here to the Perpetua exhibit. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of where my career has kind of come from, because I think it's important that people have an understanding that an artist's timeline, a track of starting out studying at the university, gaining some skills, having a sharp mind to be able to figure out like, where you're going to take your work and what you're going to do with it. I think that track is important, I think, for people to understand. But the Perpetua exhibit is kind of my latest endeavor. It's inspired, from the ocean. For the last 7+ years, my family and we've been going out to the coast, and both from like the British Columbia, Victoria area, all the way down to like Monterey, California. And each time we go out there, I'm always inspired by what the landscape offers, and just the beauty of it. And for me, it's just kind of a peaceful place to be, and a lot to discover. And so I really wanted to kind of take the sea and create some sculptures that reflected, what was going on around me. It all started with the Sea Star. I was showing in a gallery in Cannon Beach, Oregon, and when I was out in Oregon in 2016, we were noticing that the starfish were kind of disappearing, and the tide pools were full at once, and then next time we'd go back, you'd see less and less and less. And so then we did a bunch of research, and we found out that the starfish were suffering from what was called a wasting disease. And so it was a plague that basically started in 1972 on the east coast of Maine area, and then slowly over time had started infecting up to 40 different species of starfish. And then it ended up moving over to the west coast, where it's pretty prevalent now, and it's coming back. But we started seeing the starfish basically disappearing, and we actually got to experience this wasting disease with seeing actually some of the starfish looking literally like they were melting apart. So their legs were basically falling off. You'd see parts of their bodies still kind of mounted to the basalt rock, but then legs and things would be kind of dangling. And it was very unusual. And they attribute part of it to the ocean warming, but they're not really sure exactly what is causing it. But fortunately, we are seeing more starfish coming back to the tide pools now on the north coast of Oregon. And you're seeing them more now as you kind of move south into like Monterey area, but slowly. So I wanted to commemorate the starfish, and so I had a proposal for an idea to create a series of starfish, because nobody was seeing them on the coast. And so I thought, let's bring them into the galleries. Let's bring something sharp and shimmery that people can kind of look at and enjoy. And so I started doing these sea stars, and they became pretty successful. I did a whole series of these for a showing in Cannon Beach, and then other collectors had me do commission pieces based on the actual starfish in a larger scale. And so that was kind of inspiring to be able to kind of continue on with the starfish. The most recent series, again, Perpetua, explores my own personal connection to and the reverence of the sea. Working with metal to create a representational shape is a thunderous process. It's a lot of pounding, melting, fusing. This process is not like, unlike the tide's unrelenting pounding and shaping of the rugged, rocky cliffs of the coastline. So the metal lends itself to the exploration because the end product cannot never be exact rendition due to the material's inflexible nature. So we're basically dealing with the steel is, and I brought a sheet for you guys to see. This is where it all starts, right here. So this is a piece of 16 gauge, what's called hot rolled steel. And so shaping this into this, or into that, or the whale, it takes a lot of work, and and it's unrelenting, It's similar to the ocean, and each year, and how the coastline changes, and so we don't really know where we're taking the piece. We know that we have an idea for where it's going when you're doing this type of fabrication, but the end result is basically the metal really dictates that, because you can only bend this so many times, you can only weld it so many times, and then you end up kind of, backing yourself into a corner. So you just have to kind of, let it flow and hope it's successful. Some of you might have seen the article in the paper that the Missoulian did, and there's a copy over here if you guys want to take a look at this later. But in any case, it talks about the old man in the sea, and as I was creating the sculptures, I was reading the novel by Ernest Hemingway, Old Man in the Sea, and there was a lot of relationships that I was seeing from the book and what I was doing, working on in the studio, and so I decided to kind of roll with the idea of that and kind of play around with it a little bit, and so starting with the sea tortoise, titled Santiago. In the book, Hemingway describes 3 different sea creatures. One is the jellyfish, the second is a sea turtle, and the third is a mako shark. Hemingway and the old man saw the jellyfish as a disguised beauty, saw the sea turtle as being strong, and the mako shark as being like a thief, basically. Hemingway describes the turtle as a sea creature with great value, unusual, but still very friendly. The old man, Santiago, felt sorry for the turtles because he thought that the people didn't respect the friendly animal. People would cut them up, eat them. He felt attached to the creature because he believed that they had a strong heart. But they also were kind of similar to him in the sense of the strong heart, the rough feet, and that's why I felt like the texture was really great for this particular piece, reflecting the rough foot of Santiago, and of course the hands, and also in the book it talks about eating the turtle eggs to get strength, and so I really felt like titling the sea turtle Santiago was appropriate for that particular piece. I'll get this out of the way here. Skiff over here. Let's see. I don't want to. Yeah. Let's see. I think that should say. Skiff, of course, is based around kind of an abstract idea of a skiff, which is obviously a vessel, sea vessel, small typically, but it reflects Santiago's skiff and the idea that he would store his tools of the trade on it, his fishing lines, his bait, his harpoons, his gaff, his nets, his sail. And so I wanted to kind of bring kind of more of a modernist idea back into the idea of the skiff. But also, when I was putting this piece together, again, I was talking to everyone about continuing in the public art arena and doing more public art. I wanted to design this piece so it could actually be blown up into something that could be more public art size, so something like in the 25 to 30 foot range, somewhere along a riverfront or a waterfront, I think would be really appropriate for it. It doesn't have to be rusted. It could be like in a color white or something like that that kind of reflects. I think that would accent like a blue sky. Could be kind of interesting. But again, the skiff just kind of reflects Santiago's boat. Then over here we have the whale. Now, of course, in the book, Old Man in the Sea, it's about the marlin and fighting the marlin in the ocean and bringing this marlin back to show that Santiago was a great fisherman. I really wanted to do the whale instead. The whale is something that I'd always been thinking about building, and I just really wanted to go with the blue whale idea. but still kind of keeping in with the idea, the myths of the book, The Old Man and the Sea. And so I entitled this piece Manolin. Manolin was the young boy in the book that kind of cared for Santiago and would always assist him with helping carry his mast in and help bringing his boat in and bringing in food and beverages, and just kind of became kind of a friend to the old man. And so I thought it would kind of be a great reflection to be able to bring the title, at least, into the whale. And so that's why this piece is entitled Manolin. And again, getting back to the fabrication, so there's a silhouette on the center of this piece that basically is the outline of where the shape of the whale is going. And then I start banding bands around, kind of creating more of the rounded effect. And then there's a lot of cutting and trimming and cutting and trimming and heating. And then you want to be careful because you don't want to get too much overheating, because then the metal starts to move. It becomes pretty fluid. And so to keep a shape, you have to kind of heat things up at different stages. So you might weld up here, and then you might weld back here or down under here, and just kind of keep moving it around so that way you don't get a lot of contortion of the metal. And so you just you just have to work through it. It's kind of a difficult to explain. And then of course the texturing is the use of a MIG welder. And so it's basically, a MIG welder is like a wire-fed welder with copper wire. So a piece of wire comes out of a tip. So let's say it's my hand here. So you'll see a piece of wire kind of coming out the tip, and it's copper. And then you have what's called a carbon dioxide and CO, or carbon and argon, excuse me. And that's what gives it the fire and the heat to be able to melt the surface of the metal. So I set the welder to a thinner welding thickness. So it's only basically melting the surface of the metal. So like for instance, again, this is 16 gauge steel. So you can see that it's pretty thick, so I'm just melting the surface of it. And so that's basically what I'm doing to get the texture is basically moving the welder around in basically a pattern, and keeping to that pattern as I kind of move throughout the whole piece. And then once it's textured in different areas, I'll bring a steel brush back over the top, and I'll kind of beat it down with the steel brush. And what that does is it gets the blackness off of it, because it's been basically burnt. And so you have to kind of clean it up a little bit, and then I'll bring back a grinder and then grind off the finish to kind of give it this the shinier look. Now this is carbon metal, so if we took this outside this afternoon and left it out there overnight, we'd wake up tomorrow and it would be rust, And so you can put clear coats on things to kind of help hold that rust back, but typically it's going to rust, So these are more interior pieces, although I have rusted some of these, and I do like that look. I mean, it gives you that kind of more darker, leathery, kind of rich look, like the sailboat over here, and the cross piece. We had talked about the starfish and the idea of the wasting disease, commemorating the starfish. The whale tail, again, symbolizing the marlin, the battle that Santiago had with fighting this marlin for 2 days at sea, and then was able to capture and kill the marlin, tied it to his skiff. He was able to come back home. Unfortunately, he battled many sharks on his way back that ate most of the marlin, so he wasn't able to present much other than he did kill something, because the idea in the book is that he was not a good fisherman, that he had basically gotten old and just wasn't able to fish like the younger fishermen were doing, and his boat was old, and the technology of the time where other younger fishermen were going out with new boats and radios and things of that nature, and he was kind of doing the more old school style of fishing. And so it basically represents that idea of the battle of the marlin, and basically dragging Santiago out to sea. I was imagining the marlin diving, and so this piece has that kind of diving kind of feel to it. And again, the texture, same process as the turtle, same process as the whale, where it starts out with a series of bands, and then you start welding the bands together, and you're doing a lot of cutting, and you're taking pieces away, you're adding pieces, you're taking it away. Very similar to like if you were doing ceramics, so you're building it up, you're taking it away, you're building it up, you're taking it away. And so my floor would be littered with pieces, shards, small pieces, cuts from angles where I'm smoothing out the pieces. And I knew that the last piece that I was going to build as part of the show was going to be a shipwreck, and commemorating the hundreds of ships that, obviously meet tragic ends at sea. And so after completing all of the pieces, this was my last and final piece. And I basically took the remnants from everything else here that you see in the room and freeformed this piece. So basically, fabricated the base and then freeformed the rest of it using the shards and the cuts from the other pieces, and then of course doing a patina process on it. And it actually turned out to be one of my favorite pieces. There's something about that idea of the freeform nature of art. Sometimes we can get too serious on things and we think too deep into it. And so sometimes it's great when you just kind of go with the flow, and sometimes the best pieces come from just that feeling, that time, just going with it, And so it's kind of exciting. Pillar, Hemingway, of course, one of my favorite writers. He had a boat called Pillar, and it's like a 32-foot vessel, and he actually wrote a lot of books while he was on that boat. Probably did some writing on Old Man and the Sea, which is probably one of my most favorite novels of his. I thought when first off, I found these are wagon wheel rims. So there's a piece of metal that goes on the outside of this. So you have the inside, which is like the hub, and then you would have the rim, which would be the metal part on the outside. And I found these up in the North Hills. I was running with my dog up there, and typically we stay on the trails, but for whatever reason that day we decided to go off trail. And when we went off trail, I kind of kicked the ground, and I found one of these, and I was like, oh, what's this? And so I pulled it out of the ground. I was like, oh, wow, that's an old wagon wheel rim. That's great. I'll take this with me. And so I started looking around to see if I could find anything else, like any kind of rusty piece of metal that maybe might go along with this. And then I found the other one. And so I felt pretty lucky, and so I thought to myself that I definitely wanted to make use of these pieces in some type of artwork, and so I held on to them for many years. And when I was putting this show together, I started going through some of the found objects that I had collected, and to me, right away, I was like, this reminds me of like a boat hull or even like a whale vertebrae, so it has a lot of mixed kind of connotations to it. And so I decided that I would, go ahead and incorporate them into the show, and I just love the rough nature of it and just the textural aspect of them. And I mean, these have to be, I would say, pushing 100 years old, if not older. And to think that this wood was still super hard, because part of the problem is I wasn't sure if I would have the strength to be able to drill through it and support the steel mounts, And so when I drilled through it, there was still so much wood there that I was able to just, there was still a lot of strength in the wood. So it must be a hardwood, probably like an ash. Or it could even be like some type of oak as well. I actually have a friend who's a woodworker who was going to kind of look at them for me and try to decide on what type of wood it was. The cross, it's pretty literal here. When we're looking at the cross, why is it here? Why is it part of the show? It kind of has some mixed connotations to it. Not only for me does it represent, the lives that are lost at sea, but it also represents a mast that is kind of part of the story of the Old Man and the Sea. Is that Hemingway tried to describe the mast as a cross. And there's a quote that, let's see, where did I put the quote for that one? Yeah, the quote in the book, it says, he started to climb again, and at the top he fell and lay for some time with the mast across his shoulder. And so basically what Hemingway was trying to describe with that mast is that after the fishing journey and arriving home, he was, when he took his mast off his ship, he was carrying it like Christ was carrying the cross. So he was being burdened with it. And the way that he was carrying it, you know, kind of comes across as a cross. And so that's kind of why I thought I would incorporate this piece into the shows, because I wanted something to be able to symbolize the mass, but yet kind of bring that mass, or excuse me, the cross symbol into it as well. And then of course the logging collar representing a rope, something that you would tie your sail up with, and kind of bringing more again with the found object. And this piece is a found object sculpture. In the article it talks about finding the metal. I found this alongside the road. Actually, all of these parts were kind of basically just picked up off the road, different places in Montana. And you hold on to them, you save them, and then you incorporate them back into pieces. And this piece does light up. It's got a lamp bulb set up on the back to kind of reflect that glow of, you know, giving you that idea of the spirituality of it. And other than that, I just wanted to just mention that, you know, for me, the respect and the caring for the sea is so important now for us all. Even though we live in Montana, I mean, it's still part of who we are, and it's super important. You know, I just want to just mention just a few facts here. That the ocean, you know, covers 70% of our planet. 99%, it contains 99% of the living space on Earth, basically. And according to the Marine Bioconservation Society, humans have only explored less than 10% of the ocean. An estimated 2.2 million species live in the ocean. Between 50 to 80% of all life on Earth is under the sea. The largest and heaviest animal, of course, is the blue whale. It's now considered endangered. It can grow up to 100 feet and weigh up to 330,000 pounds. So a big sea animal there. The average depth of the ocean is about 14,000 feet, which should be 40 football fields deep from end zone to end zone. The ocean, whether we realize it or not, is the world's most shared resource. Billions of humans all across the globe use it as a source of income. The sea provides, air that we breathe, oxygen. Ocean plants, you know, provide us with, you know, so much oxygen, and also gives us food that feeds, like, I think they were saying, what is it, 3.5 billion people, you know, that rely on it as a food source. So there's a lot, you know, that I think that we need to think about when it comes to the sea, and we should just try to preserve it and make it be the best place that we can make it be, like we do on land. We did talk a little bit about fabrication. The welding aspect and the mask, and the reason I brought the mask here is because when I talk about welding and the relationship of the pounding and the fusing and the heating, you know, like the coastline is affected by the sea. Welding is a lot like scuba diving. It's a lot like being underwater. And so when you're welding, you have the respirator, which helps save your lungs. So you got that on. Then you got your helmet on. And then, well, glasses, I already have glasses on. So you're basically like this, and you spend a lot of time in the dark. And don't forget your earplugs. So you got earplugs on. And then you got a big coat on. And then you got gloves on. And so it's literally like wearing a scuba suit, you know, and you're kind of in your own world, you know. And so when you're creating these pieces, you're working mainly in the dark. You're in a dark place, and so yes, you may put your helmet up to kind of see what your next move is going to be, but your helmet goes back down and all you see is a bright little light, and all you see, and that's what you follow. You're following this bright little light around, and then you pull up your helmet, and then you see what your next move is going to be, which is normally a cut. And so then you put your helmet back down, and then you make a cut, and then you put your helmet up. So it's a lot of time in the dark. And I think, for me, I think that's, when you see what you finish and what you did in the dark, basically, you kind of impress yourself. Because you're like, wow, how did I do that? How did I make this work? And I, nowadays, when I first started at the university, they didn't have computerized helmets. So now things are computerized. So this is like a little computer that's kind of inside my helmet here. And so what it does is, instead of like, when I was in college, so we would right before we start the arc, because it's really hard on your eyes. And so right before you start the arc, you click your helmet down, and then you start to see the fire. And so you can start welding, and then you put your helmet back up. But now if you're doing more intricate pieces where you kind of need to see where you're going, you can start out and actually see where you're at here and then start welding. And so it saves a lot of time and a lot of cleanup, because you're able to actually take the weld where it needs to go without kind of being kind of in the dark, so to speak, starting out the weld. So it.
What does the computer do then?
It basically shades the arc. Yeah, basically. Yeah, so it shades the arc. And so for different thicknesses of metal, different bright intensities, like for instance, if I were welding over here by the window, I would have to set the gauge on the light, because it would change the light that's being reflected off the arc and the light that's coming through the window. So oftentimes I like to be in the dark, kind of more or less. I'm not in a really bright room, because I know that I'm going to be able to see better through the helmet as I'm welding. But using the right equipment, making sure you have a respirator, making sure you use eye gear. I've had metal fly into my eye a million times, and running into the house telling my wife what do I have in my eye, and pulling things out of your eye and stuff like that. So you really want to make sure that, when sparks are flying, you get burned a lot, and you'll be welding, and this happens a lot. So you'll be welding. And what will happen is a big spark will go up like this, and then it'll go right down your shirt. And then you find yourself, am I on fire? What's going on here? And I have lit myself on fire before, and it's not fun, And you go running, and that stop, drop, and roll kind of thing works. So, but in any case, so you just want to protect yourself. Welding is the type of art form that you can learn armatures, you can learn how to use the equipment, but really you just kind of have to take it and where you can take it, And I work with a lot of other great artists that, each of us are doing our own thing, and it's really neat to see how each person does something a little bit different. And it's a great medium to work in, and I really enjoy doing it. And so thank you all for listening and for your time. Thank you. Thank you guys. Yeah. And did you guys have any? Yeah. Yes.
When you start those pieces like the whale,
yes.
Do you have a form underneath it, or how do you get it
to
form?
Yeah, I did kind of start talking about that, and I think I got off track. So basically, I have templates. So what I do is, so I have I have this drawn out in a flat dimension on the actual steel itself. Then I cut that out. So I have one piece going right down the center right here. Then I start adding to that. So I'll do it like a double layer basically. So it almost looks very similar to like the starfish. This is a great example right here. So you have basically this kind of look right here going on. So it's like narrow and long. And then I start banding it. So then I start adding the bands kind of going around. And each band is hand bent. So, it's, I take like a 2-inch strip of this metal. Typically I'll do like a 2-foot piece about like this. This is like 2 feet. and then I'll cut a 2-inch strip off of that. And then I kind of started on my vise where I kind of start pounding it and kind of making it round, and then I just basically take my hands, and as the metal's kind of hot, I'm able to actually kind of form it, yeah. So keeping things symmetrical can be kind of tough, but you just, like you said, you just have to kind of work through it, you know. Yeah.
Well, you have to have a passion in order to go through all that gear stuff.
You do, yes, you do, yeah, you do, yeah, you do, yeah.
So then is the whale hollow inside?
Part of it is because in order to get the mouth structure, so so this is solid coming all the way right down the middle, and then I start banding the side here because I knew at some point I was going to have to cut a mouth into it, and so cutting the mouth into it, I wanted I wanted to have a little bit more something there, but I also wanted to create a little bit more dimension by having the mouth kind of cut in there, and so yeah, so it's hollow on this outside here, and then solid on the inside. So.
There you have it.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Yes, it's large.
Very.
Yeah.